Bill Gates once said, for a difficult task, I will always choose a lazy person because the lazy person will find a simple way to cope with her. What such examples of life can you bring? My brother paid my senior nephew $10 a week so that he fulfilled all his duties in the house without reminders and whining. Once, a brother returns from work early and see what a picture a neighboring kid throws their garbage bag into a trash. His brother asks what he does. What the boy answers, that he gets $5 a week for performing several household chores. In short, the nephew seduced his affairs at the house, outsourcing children's labor, and this kid will once become the head of Nike. The engineer spent several hours in our country on the creation of the program with which you can turn on the coffee maker, being in the workplace, so that when he goes on a break, he did not need to wait until the coffee is prepared. Some years ago, I was a student. I got a job to lay out the goods on the shelf. The guys dragged heavy boxes on the floor and then leaned each time to get the goods from there and put it on the shelf. I was a thin girl, cheerful in the region of 45 kilograms, so pulling boxes for me was the same atom. So one fine day the idea came to my mind. I put the box on the old office chair and began to roll it everywhere. There was no more to wear boxes and constantly bend. It is funny that most guys, instead of taking an example from me, called me a lazy person and continued to carry heavy boxes simply to show how strong they are. Now they have special carts that are already doing work. I am just busy now, automated the data cleaning on Python, so my colleagues are not aware of this topic, so they spend 2 hours on what takes 10 minutes from my strength. And what if they are in the know? It is just better than you to portray employment. One summer he worked as a laborer in a local nursery. My daily duties included watering 15,000 plants. He threw a plan of irrigation on a napkin and for the next few weeks was engaged in the fact that he built it with the money bosses. 15 years later, the system is still working and fulfilling its function, and I decided myself, I had to look for a new one. 2 years after that, I received an engineer diploma, and I am convinced that engineers are by nature lazy people. They are ready to spend an adequate amount of effort to make life easier. My former boss sends a table to not Excel. Table for 124,000 lines. On each line there was data on the client's client, and they were repeated twice, and in some of these duplicates there was a mistake. The leader asked me to view all the lines, one after another, and mark all the data found. Water 124,000 lines. She wanted me to do this with an arrow down and a mouse. I told her thank you. Sat down. I spent half an hour in Google, copied some pieces of one formula, then pieces of some other formula. Finally I got my formula. I clicked on a small rectangle twice so that the formula applies to all lines, and everything worked as it should. I got up, went to myself, I chatted with my colleagues, then went to the boss. She expected me to take 3 days for this task. Therefore, when he returned to her in less than an hour, she decided that I did not understand the task or wanted to ask a clarifying question. I will never forget her face when I said that I finished. The table was 6 errors. A year and a half after that I went to study at the University of Informatics. I finished my undergraduate this summer. The clerk was asked to bring 145 white sheets of paper into the office. He did not want to count them manually, so he printed 145 empty pages and brought them. When we studied in high school, we went to school home through one park. Part of our path passed through the forest, because it was so much faster than walking along the path. At some point while you walked through the forest, you had to climb a small, but very dreary slide. It was not terrible, but climbing required 10 seconds of powerful efforts. It was not an option to get around it, since on the one hand there was a small cliff over the stream, and on the other thick trees. In one summer we have gathered a whole company and we decided to unearth this slide and reduce with the ground. To cope with the task, it took 14 people and 3 days of work. They were hard for 3 days, but they were ambiguously worth it. No longer needed 150 plus days a year, every morning and after lessons to climb 10 seconds per hill. And we saved time not only for ourselves, but also hundreds of other children who walked along the same path, every day. Sometimes you need to spend a lot of effort in the present in order to enjoy a mild life in the future. I was called to the annual collection of apples from my friend. All day the children collected apples, filled the van, so that later one could make a sitter. But I am lazy, so I immediately offered to speed up the process and covered the entire area with a tarp. As a result, we did in 2 hours what usually takes them all day. It didn't even come to a dining picnic. In short, I set up all the collection of apples. Apparently it is mean that they shook trees, and then collected fallen apples. If you put a tarp, you can just take it by the ends and fill the apples into the container. I don't really know this story or not, but it is suitable for your question. There was one production on which they made toothpaste. In some year, for some reason, and abnormally many empty boxes began to go from there. So that this is no longer repeated, the head of the company hired a couple of engineers to come up with a system that will capture empty boxes and send only those where there are tubes with paste. Engineers have developed a system that worked as the following principle. If the box weighs less than a certain value, then the system stops. The employee comes, removes the empty box and starts it all over again. The head of the company liked this idea, and they instantly implemented life. Immediately the number of empty shipped boxes fell to 0. Then once, the head of the company expresses a desire to look at this system in the case. He comes to production and sees the assembly line a huge fan. Open. Since it was not hot, he asks the manager what this fan does there. And does the manager explain to him that the workers were so tired of interrupting their work in order to remove the empty box, that they put a fan there, which blow out empty boxes from the scales, before the system determines that they are empty, and turn off everything to hell. So laziness led to a more productive and profitable plan. When Carl Friedrich Gauss, a well-known German mathematician and physicist, studied at elementary school, about 1784 years, his class was given a difficult task to add all numbers from 1 to 100, 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 and so on. Such a task usually it was enough for the children not to make noise for about half an hour. But 7-year-old Carl was already sitting with the correct answer, 5050. While the rest were just beginning to count. A surprised teacher asked him how he came to his decision, to which he replied that he had folded one of him and received 101 and 99 and received 101.3 plus 98 and so on. He realized that there is a pattern. All numbers can be divided into 50 pairs where the sum of each pair is 101. And 50 multiplied by 101 is 5050. He worked on laying out goods in a supermarket. When we needed to fill the cooler with milk, the people usually torn the packages from 12 bottles of milk and laid out bottles one at a time. On my first day, I immediately put the whole box in the cooler, cut a plastic package with my knife on the side, and pulled out from under milk. On the face of the manager of the store and another employee who taught me, sincere bewilderment was read. Since then everyone began to do as me. In one old company, there was an employee responsible for entering data, which implied an essence of copying data from the text files of the table for the report. Formatting tables report. A person who initially performed this work spent 40+ hours a week on it. He did not really rummage in computers when he retired. The company hired someone with real skills. The new employee convinced the authorities to allow her to work out of the house as soon as she pushes into the workflow. She spent the first week at home to fully automate the work. The next few years that she worked in the company, she did what she wanted her soul and spent literally 10 to 15 minutes a week to launch her program and answers a couple of random letters. At the same time, she received a full salary and all bonuses. Sometimes, by the way, it was necessary to deliberately insert mistakes so that her work seemed plausible. There was an employee responsible for entering data, which essentially meant copying data from the textual files of the table, and then formatting tables report. I worked in a pair of places where there were also people who were engaged in such garbage as a pro, but when they retire, their work will be offended by a younger person. This one finds a way to do everything in 10 minutes and this work becomes a bonus to their normal work. I only do what I automate at work, all shit. To simplify my routine work, I am writing manuals with screenshots and piles of arrows indicating where to click and where to fill. Every time I write a manual, I assume that a person who opens is finished idiot, so every time customers call me and make the same questions, I just give them a link to the manual I created. It makes no sense to print everything 100 times by mail or retell by phone. The star of the Locan. My 9-year-old son began to come in electronic forms. Once I left it with a laptop and a house in mathematics, and she went with a 3-year-old daughter to prepare dinner. Then I go into the living room with his dinner and see how he asks to Alex, an analog of Alice, to solve each of his tasks in mathematics. The irrigation system of my greenhouse. Previously, I spent an hour a day for watering the garden is 30 hours a month. As a result, he spent $50 and in a few hours he built a pipe from PVC pipe. Now I can only turn the crane and watch the process by smoking joint. Put the tit crane. My girlfriend will kill me, but poor. I hate when toilet paper ends and I have to carry a sleeve to the trash on the ground floor. And if you leave an empty roll in the toilet, then my girlfriend will be beside herself with anger. Therefore, I have developed my strategy. When literally a few squares remain on the roll, I start a new roll, and I leave the old ones as it is. Thus, the roll always ends on my girlfriend and you have to drag it down. One of my favorite examples of Andy Kim. It's more to say that I think he is more likely to geniuses than a lazy person. Andrew Joaquin was a song singer to the Raiders, who became popular under the pseudonym Andy Kim. He achieved success due to the fact that he wrote songs to groups like Arcos, including the famous Suga Suga. After his success he rested on his laurels for some time and then the label threw it out because he stopped writing new material. Then he created his own label and gave out hits like Rock Me Gently. Seeing this, large labels bought a label Andrew, in the hope that they will earn aircraft of his new songs and performances. But very soon he scored to write songs and began to live by selling his label. Smart will not go uphill. Thank you very much for watching. In the comments under the video, write your similar stories and do not forget to watch our other issues.